Hello, hello. This is Alex Burkett, and you're listening to the Long Game Podcast. In this episode, I talked to Ramli John. Ramli is the content director at AppCues and the author of the best-selling book, Product-Led Onboarding. As a product-led growth coach, he's worked with companies such as Mixpanel, Microsoft, Ubisoft, and more to accelerate their growth. In this conversation, we talked deeply about product-led growth, focusing on onboarding, but also the interplay between marketing and sales and product. We cover content programs launched at AppCues, like their Academy, as well as their video-first and AI repurposed content production line. We also talk about Ramli's own creator efforts with his podcast and his newsletter, and how he's thinking about the future with a little bit of breaking news on the Long Game Podcast. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Ramli John. You and I did a podcast together in 2018.
Oh, man.
You know, it was that long ago.
That was so long. You were one of the first. Thank you for coming on. Growth Marketing Today. Man, shoot. That's way back.
Well, we've come a long way. We've both changed a lot. So I think since then it was like 155 episodes of Growth Marketing Today, and you're somewhere in the 80s for marketing power-ups, right?
Yeah.
What do you know now? 200 plus podcast interviews later that you didn't know then about interviewing, creating good content, building a show.
Something that I didn't really expect was I've become really good friends with the folks that I've chatted with. That's like an added benefit of the show, of doing a podcast. It's like some of the people that you interview end up becoming like your colleagues or your friends, and you catch up like once in a while. And now you're like meeting each other in person, not just at conferences, but like your families meeting each other, like your kids meeting their kids.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've gotten to that point where that's been really cool. That's on a more personal level. On more, I guess, like interviewing style, or like there's always more to learn, man. Like it's just, I think that's the one thing that chatting with more people, there's like 2018, there was no AI, there was no search generative, there was like things like ChatGPT didn't exist. And now, like, it's really changed dramatically, not just for marketing, but product and tech in general. I think that's what's cool about this, is like, as you evolve, things around you evolve as well.
I'll tell you from the outside perspective, having been on the early podcast and now going to be on Marketing Power-Ups, it's like it looks like you've learned a lot more about how to package a show. Mm. And what I mean by that is like the name, Marketing Power-Ups, it has a certain connotation. You've got the what is that called? 8-bit pixel? Yeah, the 8-bit branding, even filling out like the guest form, like you've got a whole page that, trains you on how to prepare for it. It feels like from the guest experience, as well as just like the outside, that there's a lot more. It's almost like a product marketing approach to how you've done the show versus I think even us, sometimes we're like, yeah, we just get on a mic and we talk to smart people. We don't have like a premise or packaging. So does that resonate with you? Is that it feels conscious?
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I've like tried to been more. You're right, been more conscious about is like, how do you stand out? I think there's a lot more shows out there and a lot more noise, and like how do I add my weirdness and personality? Like Louis Grainer does this a lot with his show. Like Everybody Hates Marketers, where like talks a lot about like embrace, and Pep does this too, where like embrace your weird, man. And I'm thinking a lot about that. Marketing Powers was born out of my, like, I love video games, like old school video games when I was a kid, like 80s, like Super Mario Kart, like King Kong, Donkey Kong, like all that stuff. And like, how do I like remix and mash that with another thing that I enjoy, marketing, and just create this thing that just looks like nothing that I have seen before. So I think that's like, how do I like embrace my inner weirdness and embody like my personality into what I'm doing? That's what I've been thinking a lot more lately, especially like I mentioned, it's harder and harder to stand out. And one thing that a competitive edge is like, just how do you embrace something that's about you and remixing that into what you're working on. So you're right. It has been really more conscious about how I package things.
One thing that's interesting to me is you'd mentioned that it is getting harder to stand out. There's a ton of competition moving into podcasts. There's like, I think LeBron James started a podcast, right? Like it's not even just within, like every B2B brand has, or not everybody, a lot of B2B brands have them now, but it's also like you're competing for shelf space among all categories, right? And there's one narrative going on now it's been going on for a while, but sort of build a media company, entertain, most customers are out of market, so you have to reach them through creative ways. And I sometimes have trouble reconciling those two, where it's like, yes, SEO is getting more saturated, and yes, paid ads are getting more expensive and more saturated, but like, so are the creative channels. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on, maybe from the brand perspective, like how much alpha is there left in terms of like, it doesn't have to be just a podcast, like, but building shows, building kind of novel entertainment series. Are you optimistic about this in terms of like brand growth, or how do you feel?
Yeah, I feel like there's been like a pendulum swing where like 2 years ago, it was like full head on data driven, like growth tactics. Like, how do you like optimize? And then like, I don't know if we're going to talk about AI, but like AI is here. It's like definitely here. It has dramatically changed how SEO is done and search and, analytics. Like, and I feel like there's like a lot of more marketers that I've talked to have swung back to the other end and talked about like, how do we create things that is weird and stands out? Like some of the stuff that I've heard where they're sponsoring more creators and asking them to create words. An example is like with Podia, chatted with their senior growth marketer, Mark Thomas. He sponsored this Podia for creators, and they sponsored this creator who creates like plant-based juice. And Podia is like, the brand color is purple. So as a joke, they're like, what if you create a purple drink or purple juice or something? And it's plant-based. And she did. It's now like the purple juice sponsored by Podia. I'm like, what the heck? Like, who thinks about that stuff? And companies like creating like podcast series that are not like interview style. Like one that I've heard Gympass, where it's like a tool for HR, and they created like a murder series podcast, like murder in HR. I'm like, who thinks about that? But like when you do something that the most B2B doesn't do, then they're like, 1 second, it kind of, stop people from what they're doing. And like, what the heck is that? It's like that pattern interrupt where they're used to seeing blue for enterprise B2B companies, and now it's like totally different. Like it's like something that I haven't seen before. So I think I feel like marketers have been thinking a lot more about that, or like, how do we stand out? It's something that even us at AppCues, like, how can we be weird? And an example in Valentine's was like, some of our teammates, we wrote a poem and we filmed a video, but I actually rapped. Like, I created a rap for Hotjar because they're one of our customers. So like, I rapped a song, and it was embarrassing, like absolutely embarrassing. Really? But Hotjar loved it. Like, they were like, thank you so much for highlighting us as your customer. And some other people are like, I didn't even know Ramli raps. Like, as well.
Is this online?
It is on LinkedIn. You can tag it. Like, okay. I put on my sunglasses. I started like, I even had a chorus. Like, it was like just a minute long.
Wait, so was this like a planned thing, or did you just like make this on your own accord and kind of send it over to Hotjar? Or like, was this a partnership?
It was a planned thing. It was like, we called it ValentCues, AppCues, like sending like love messages to our customers.
Oh, I got you. Yep.
Yeah. And then so like, 10 of us from our team picked 10 customers, and the other 9 created a poem. I was like, poem's cool. Let me rap it. It's close. Rap. Like, a poem is a rap. So I'm like, I mean, like, people are thinking more about like things, more creative work. So I think going back to your question, yeah, I think there has been a pendulum. I don't know if it's going to last, and maybe it'll come back all the way to the data-driven side of marketing.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like, it doesn't need to be one of two extremes, right? It's like, two of my favorite books of all time are Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb, which is all about risk and probability, and it's filled with charts and statistics. And then the other one is Alchemy by Rory Sutherland, and it's all about the irrational and the persuasion and basically like the artistic side of marketing. And it's like, to me, like those two, you could always sort of blend in an interesting way, but it does seem like organizations tend to have one or the other DNA.
That's true.
And I think that's why some of these companies struggle to build the brand and marketing or the maybe media initiatives, is because they're coming from a background of like, all right, we're quant, we need ROAS, we need like direct last click attribution. And like that model maybe doesn't translate as well to the other side, as well as vice versa, right? Like it's like, you sort of have to have some mindset where it's like, what if? I wonder if we did this thing. And then you go from that wondering, that what if, to being like, let's do it, see what happens.
Yeah. This is like top of mind because I was watching this YouTube video with Gary Tan from YC. He was talking about how a lot of entrepreneurs, what they have is a mindset where they're like short-term pessimists and long-term optimists, where most people the other way around, where like, they optimize for short-term rather than long-term. And I think that's exactly what what you're mentioning is like, like the what if, like, let's think about long-term, like, it might not necessarily give us the leads we need, though we need to be doing some stuff to make sure that we hit our lead numbers or whatever metrics you need for the short term. But like long term, like how do we like succeed? And the stuff that is long term is often, you find a balance between long term and short term, obviously. But like, I think a lot of companies are too focused on short term that they miss out on like doing long term stuff that can build the foundation for the future.
We did name this podcast The Long Game for a reason.
Oh yeah, you're right. That was I did that on purpose.
It always works out. So speaking of the long game, we can go as deep into this as you're comfortable with, but you put out an episode on your podcast recently, as well as announcing that you're not going to keep doing it, that you will keep doing the newsletter, if I understand correctly.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, not necessarily why you stopped doing you're stopping doing the show. You mentioned the three reasons being saying yes to good things means sort of saying no to great things. Zone of genius, which I want to ask you about actually, but we'll go into that in a little bit. And then you're thinking about the next step after the next step. But I'm wondering, like, why keep doing the newsletter but stop doing the podcast? Was it some sort of like an energy, like it took more energy to do the podcast? Did you see more alpha in the newsletter, more creativity? What was the decision to sort of press the gas on one while stopping on the other?
Yeah, I think that's it. Part of it is energy. I think part of it is like easier to continue a newsletter going forward because like I can write about my ideas, but like continuing to support like a video podcast requires a little bit more coordination and effort. And while I'm in this, like, while I transition Marketing Power-Ups to this new thing, I wanted to make sure that I'm supporting and respecting the people who have been on my list for some time. So I think that's part of the strategy around that is like, yeah, I want to continue giving you value. And there's some newsletter content that I still have in my head that I can share, even like some of the stuff that your team has been creating. That's a whole new newsletter episode that might not necessarily come from my own podcast, but like I'm highlighting ideas that other people have that can appear on the newsletter.
Yeah, totally. Well, it resonates with me. And it's one of those things like back to the idea of DNA within a company, but people think, oh, like podcast media initiative, like people are doing this now, I should do this. But like, I think a lot of people don't understand it's not just like work and time that it goes into it. It's like really like a lot of, it's like mental focus. And it some people love it. Some people love being in front of the camera. I enjoy the conversational aspect, but I'll tell you that it's much easier for me to sit down and write a newsletter. And I could do that sustainably for the rest of my life. So like I'm on like an energy wavelength. If I had to stop one or the other, it would probably be the podcast, just merely because of how much focus it takes to really do it well. Where it's like I'm constantly stewing in the world of ideas and I love writing. Like writing gives me a lot of energy. So I can kind of see that, it's like if you don't love doing it, like the podcast is actually tremendously difficult to continue and sustain, which is why it's so impressive that you've done, 200 plus episodes over the past, 5-6 years.
Yeah, no, totally. I'm not saying that I will come out with another podcast. Like I love chatting with folks, and I think you're right. It requires a tremendous amount of focus. And that focus is like, how does it fit into the bigger picture of what I'm trying to achieve? And if it doesn't, then like start making that, starting to make that transition over.
So what's your zone of genius?
That's all right. I think it's something that I've been thinking a lot about. Like I think you just want to jump in head first.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like it.
Just a light, surface level question. Nothing deep here.
I think that leads into like what I've been doing for the past 3 to 4 years around helping SaaS companies around with their onboarding. I think that's where I want to get back into, and I'm giving a little bit of a teaser, but like that's where Actually, I'm just gonna say it. I'm rebranding marketing power ups to user power ups. So it's more focused around helping users become paying customers essentially, which I wrote a whole book about it. I've been helping companies around it, and I think that makes a ton of sense for me to get back into what people know me for, and like talking to people about it and getting back into that. So you heard it here first before anywhere else.
Breaking news. Well, that's amazing. I mean, you do have the track record, product-led, institute, the book, like you've got AppCues, like there's so many things in your resume that sort of speak to that. And it's interesting, like being both an expert in a given area as well as a content creator, which leads me to transition to a question that I wanted to talk to you about. You had mentioned a big play, not even a play, but like a program being this Product Adoption Academy within AppCues. So high level, tell me what it is. What's the vision? What's the overall... What is it?
It started off as just an email course, and then it became into a video course, and now like it's becoming into this like place for people to really improve their product adoption. And I know that's a little big, but courses are one part of it. But one thing that I've heard over and over again is like people are always looking for inspiration, and that's why like marketing examples, I forgot who started that, or like swipe files is always a great like content program or a thing that you can share. So like part of that Product Adoption Academy has 3 parts now. There's the courses, there's examples, and then the last thing is something that I've also heard, like people love templates. Like if you're in conferences, like some of the best speakers like scan this barcode and it's QR code and I'll give you my template. And it usually works well. And I think that's the other part to this. Like now you can like create like your user, not just onboarding, but your user journey template. Or some folks from Miro, actually the former head of growth design, shared her 5-step like onboarding template. So I think that's been the strategy, is like it's whether you want to just like get the template or you want to find inspiration, or you actually want to go deep dive into like a course, that's where this Product Adoption Academy is around. And the reason why it's been so important for us, the space that AppCues is in is become very competitive. Like, there's competitors, small competitors like Product Fruits or User Flow or User Pilot. If people looked up onboarding software, you're going to be targeted by so many ads from different products. And the question is, how do you stand out? And one way to do it is through like continue to establish yourself as the place where people learn and see you as that leader who, share cutting edge frameworks or templates or inspirational stuff and free courses, certification courses that you can post up on LinkedIn. So it is a way to position AppCues as like, hey, we know our stuff. And because of that, we might not necessarily be the best product for X, Y, or Z, but like if you establish yourself as a thought leader or somebody who knows that space, then they're more likely to trust what you're working on or the product that you built.
That makes sense. And a thought crossed my mind, and I don't even know if this was part of your vision, and I might be a little bit out of the game here, but product onboarding feels to me, or it used to feel at least, that it was sort of an overlooked and underrated part of the growth equation, in that people would think about maybe virality, product management, and then customer acquisition. But this bridge between the two worlds was a little bit like, yeah, we'll just use maybe like best practices or like this common flow or something like that. But it wasn't. It was a little underemphasized. And there's something to maybe building some formality around a role or a craft that brings a little bit more weight and seriousness to it. In the sense, and I was thinking about inbound marketing and the certificate program from HubSpot, even to the extent in 2015 or so, conversion rate optimization was really underrated and overlooked. And CXL had an agency, but also like launching the institute and like all of the education around it, sort of evangelize the industry or the role as a whole too, making it like this thing. And I would imagine that that's probably like a secondary, tertiary benefit of this, but it brings some formality to product onboarding.
That's true. You're right. You're like, educating the market around this idea and formality. And now, like, if people think about inbound and you need a product or you need a tool, HubSpot.
Mm-hmm.
If you need some marketing education, like, there's one of the top 3 lists is CXL, because like that's what they've established themselves as. So you're like, by educating the market, you're making sure that you're in the top consideration list rather than like, oh, who is that again?
Yeah,
now
exactly.
You're like, oh, I'm looking for inbound software. Oh, you got to consider HubSpot or something else.
Well, in terms of goals, how do you think about the goals of the academy? Is it like a customer education thing, sort of retention, building more value, customer acquisition, and like how are you measuring these things?
Yeah, part of it is just how many people complete a course. So we have a certification issued goal. Like I have a weekly goal that I own around that. That's one of the metrics. The other thing is like how many of those end up signing up, or how many of them are current users or free users or trial users who end up becoming a paying customer. So I think that's part of the drive there, is the work impacting our marketing metrics. The challenge right now we have is like marketing owns like pre-sale. So like in terms of retention, that is not something I track. I would love to like see, hey, is this actually, I know there's a bunch of customers who sign up for it, but that is not necessarily the primary goal of that adoption academy, though I find a majority of customers end up going through it.
That's what I imagined. I'm way too far out from my HubSpot days. And like, obviously I couldn't say numbers if I knew, but I remember that being something we had tracked, was like the impact of, courses in academy on net revenue retention and expansion and all of that stuff. So that could be an interesting sort of like, I'm sure it takes a lot longer to track those things as opposed to like the course completion, but I wouldn't be surprised if it makes a positive impact on that as well.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. I think that's something that I would love to see. I think that's just it requires more tracking and then making sure that the data flows, and takes a little bit more time to see the impact of that.
Well, I'm going to ask you a silly question that you've almost certainly been asked before. What does the term product-led mean?
Product-led. Oh man, I think that's like such a hot thing, because like it depends on who you ask. I think for me, what it means to be product led is, I think first of all, making sure that you're creating the product in a sense that you're prioritizing one thing, which is like, how do I make my end user successful with what they're trying to achieve? And what that means is usually there's a conflict with what buyer. So there's a buyer versus the end user. The buyer's goal usually is like the executive, when they buy a software, the traditional way to buy it is like VP or a C level buys software, and now everybody has to use it at this company, and it's a really bad software. And usually like the traditional idea is like, they buy Salesforce because it's safe, but like Salesforce was not originally optimized. I actually signed up for Salesforce recently, and I was impressed by how great their onboarding is now compared to before. I was like really shocked, but like originally it was like buyers buying Salesforce, end users a terrible experience, right? Because like they've already bought it. And I think that's what it means to be product led. It's like, how do we help the users make themselves successful with the product itself, removing any kind of unnecessary friction. And that doesn't mean that they shouldn't talk to the team. Sometimes some users do want to chat with your customer success team or your sales team. So I think just making it easy for them to achieve what they want and to be successful is what I call product led. That's my definition. I'm sure like if you ask 10 people what product led means, you'll get 20 different responses. But like if I had to boil down,
it's the same with every term. I mean, growth, remember growth back in 2014 meant something so different than what it means now. So it's like that happens with terms. But I think one common misconception, it sounds like at least the way you're describing it, is that a lot of people think product led means freemium or free trial, sort of the purchasing process or the trial or usage process, like being essentially like you can just sign up and try the product. It seems like that's maybe an oversimplification.
I would say so. I think there are some products, I don't want to name names because I don't remember them, thank goodness, where they have a free trial, but like it's a terrible experience and they actually make it super hard for users to achieve what they want. I'm like, wow, you got a free trial. And they're like, oh, check, you got your product, like you got free trial. But like, it's so dang hard for me to do what I want to do with it. Like, it's that like, they're missing the whole point of that whole movement. Like, how do we make this as easy that, originally product led was from the consumer software side where it's do or die for consumer software, where if people sign up and they don't like find value right away, they leave. Versus like in B2B's adopted this, like it really needs to be focused on user success. And if it's not, then it's not really what people think it is.
One thing that interests me is like those that sort of start out product led versus those that layer it on later. And you mentioned Salesforce actually making some progress in this arena, but I'm curious, right? Like you've got maybe legacy software, enterprise software, and they're like, we need to make this a more enjoyable, delightful experience for the end user. We need to go product led. Is it so? I don't know if they can like overhaul the entire product experience, but there seems to be sort of like bridges or like intermediary ways to do this with product tours or sort of like sandbox environments. Do you still look at this in the arena of product led growth, or is this something that's different entirely?
I would say, yeah, I think as long as the user is getting some value and they're getting closer to it on their own, I think that it is in the realm of product led growth. And once again, like some people will argue with me, it's like, that's not product led growth, like having a sandbox or this whole trend with out of product tours, or what is that called, with product demos, where things like Novatic or Endgame or things like that, or Reprise, where you can like click around to see it even before you sign up for the product. Is that product led? Some people say no. For me, I think that's like how you show value to user before they get in. I think it's a great like stepping stone for, especially if you're an enterprise product. So like kind of getting them ready to chat with that as well.
Well, I think there's an interesting question here, and you can't answer with it depends. But I had we used product tours, product demos at Workato, and then I was actually on the freemium acquisition team at HubSpot. So two very different models. Okay, so how do you think companies should balance? Like, there's user education, like your product-led academy or product adoption academy could fit into that, where you're sort of getting some semblance of what AppCues does. I'm sure you interweave a little bit of product education within that, and product tours, right? It's sort of a product-based content arena with just simply allowing users to discover value, self-serve, kick the tires on their own. What's the right mix? No, it depends.
Oh shoot! Okay, not it depends. What is the right mix? I think it's like, I was gonna say it depends, but how do I say this? But can I say it depends on? Okay.
Yes. You can give me the dimensions. Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
Like I think it depends on like where the users are, and also of course your product itself. I think the more complex the product is, the more education it requires. So a perfect example is I'm trying to think of a very simple software, like let's say Calendly, where it's super straightforward. You're there. You're gonna use Calendly to connect your calendar so that you can send out a link to schedule a guest for podcasts or a sales contact. So like that's obviously, hopefully, a straightforward process where like connect your calendar, test out the link, share the link, kind of thing. Where it gets super complicated is when your product is like a Swiss Army knife, where now you got like this tool and it can cut wood, it can start fire, it can like do so many different things. AppCues is an example of that, where like, sure, it's known for onboarding, but like product marketing comes in. They use it for in-app messaging for product releases, or customer success use it to create experiences for customers or things like that. And Salesforce is another example where it could be used for multiple things. And even you worked at HubSpot. HubSpot is now at a place where it is not just a marketing tool. It's could do so much.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, I think there needs to be first like trying to understand what the user wants, but like also educating the user as to the true power of the product itself and getting them deeper into it, and the different use cases that, did you know that you could also do this for that, and that's where the education program could be very, very helpful to like educating them on different things that they didn't know, not just what the product can do, but how they can do their job better than they didn't know before.
Yeah, totally. I was just thinking of like maybe the oldest example I can think of, and I was like, Microsoft Excel or something like that. You would install it, and like I think on your own you can figure out, wow, I can click on a cell and I can type things into it. But that's like a completely different lever or layer than being like, what is VLOOKUP and how does this help me accomplish certain things? So like on one hand, yeah, you can kick the tires and like figure some things out yourself. But then there's a whole bunch of complexity, and like there's stuff that is still evolving and innovating in that space. So it's like, to a smaller degree, a SaaS product like HubSpot also has that where you're like, yeah, I can kind of figure out how to write copy in an email editor, but can I figure out how to build advanced automations that connect CRM activities to sales activities, and it's like different layers.
I like that. That's a great example with Spreadsheet and HubSpot.
Yeah, Spreadsheet, the pinnacle of technology.
It is the competitor of every SaaS product. I think that's an really April Dunford joke. We're like, everybody thinks the competitor is the competitor, and April Dunford is like, no, it's actually either interns or spreadsheets.
That's so true. So I think most of our audience is probably on the marketing side. I have no idea who my audience is. Rick Rubin. What role should marketing and sales? This is a very like a subtle reference, but Rick Rubin says, don't care about your audience. So what role should marketing and sales play in a product-led growth model? We talk a lot about onboarding and the product itself, but like clearly, like there's got to be some impact or like influence that they have on the users you're driving or like the upsells. Like, how do you look at that interplay?
Yeah, you mentioned upsells. I think there's also room for sales, particularly. I think that's another misconception, and what product-led gets a bad rap is around, product-led means there's no sales. But like some of the best B2B product-led companies have sales, and they do it well. And where they do it well is like trying to figure out at the moment of where users are and like getting them to like connect with them and like, it sounds like you're stuck here. Let me show you around. And really, like that's where sales can fit in. Is like, how do you start a conversation when I say there's two great moments when a salesperson can get through to a user, because in general, most users don't want sales reaching out, but like either a user is super happy they've just accomplished something, or like they're super sad and they're upset because the product's not working. And that's like two key moments in the user's journey where a sales can be the solution to their problem, or like their coach to their success. Be like, congrats, you did XYZ. And at the same time, I think marketers have that key role there, where using all that data that the users have, what they've done or not done, how do you like customize or like personalize an experience where what a user has done and give them a message or show them messaging, not necessarily just email, but like in the product that can help them go to the next step. One of the greatest pet peeve that I have, and I heard this from a friend recently, where he signed up for a product and he connected the product to his calendar. And then he got an automated email the next day. It's like, by the way, Jeff, did you connect your calendar to our product already? And Jeff was telling me, man, I was so annoyed because like I already did this. Why are you telling me this again? And it's still a challenge, I think, for a lot of messaging. It's like, how do you make sure that your experience in your product, and this is something that HubSpot talked a lot about, right message to the right person at the right time, but how do you not just do that before the sign up, but throughout the experience where Jeff has done this. Let's not send that message. Like, how do we send Jeff a message that will guide them to the next layer of their messaging. So I think that's where the true power of like marketing and sales have a key important role. Obviously, product marketing plays a big role in product led, because like now a lot of the positioning and messaging is people are signing up on their own, and you providing that context of what the product can and can't do will hopefully set the expectation for the users when they get in, for sure. So I think they have those kind of roles there.
Yeah. And it seems that there maybe is like a different incentive structure. We're always talking about like metrics and what marketers should be goaled on. Like even in the enterprise SaaS context, they're like, oh, like MQLs are no more, SQLs are no more, SALs are no more, right? You've got to have like high intent revenue opportunities or influence pipeline or something like that. But with product, you've got such a, like an easier base of data to say, hey, the customer, the traffic that we're bringing in is converting to, let's say, freemium, and then they're activating, they're engaged users, and then they're converting to paid users. And like you can sort of like there's easier funnels and tools that you can build for those. So it seems like the marketer's job then is like more about maybe efficient traffic acquisition, right? If you're like an AI tool, AI writing tool, you could probably generate a ton of traffic and users, freemium users, by targeting college students. But like, are they going to sign up for your enterprise team plan? Probably not. So like, it seems like you can sort of partition out and segment more of your customer acquisition channels in these product-led models too.
Yeah, that's actually like what one of the goals that our marketing team owns is not just like number of signups or number of traffic, but like how many of them ended up becoming an opportunity for the sales team, or how many of them end up becoming a paying customer. So like it's not just like leads, it's more so like those high intent leads that you mentioned. Like it is more, those quality is more important for more product led marketing teams.
Well, speaking of AI writing, and you said earlier, you're like, hey, I don't know if we're going to talk about AI. We are going to talk about AI. It's 2024.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you've got an AI tech stack for content at AppCues. Can you tell me about how you're approaching AI, how you're incorporating it?
Yeah, there's a few tools, and this is like mainly part of our like video podcast, our video series, where how do we repurpose? I think that's where other smarter folks like Ryan Law, director of content marketing at Chefs, has talked a lot about how AI can only do so much, and one of them that it does really well is repurposing content. So like our videos, we repurpose that to blog posts and social snippets and other things. We have three main tools that we actually Riverside's one of them. This recording where it's gotten so smart, or like it not just transcribes it like you can now edit stuff with Riverside. They're like continually pushing the limit of like what it can and can't do. So that's one thing that it can't do right now is like create better clips. So we've been using Opus clips to like create vertical format clips that people might have seen on Instagram or in TikTok, where it's like somebody talking as videos. So like you plug in like a 60-minute episode, and Opus clip will try to find like the most interesting based on its AI algorithm or whatever. But like it'll give you like a score out of 100, where like we think this is like a 99 because it's an interesting topic versus not, and then it'll create the vertical clips that you can post up on social media. And the last one that we've been using is a tool called Summarize, and this is like a tool where you plug it in and it'll like create blog posts and content around it. It definitely needs a little bit of help still, like in terms of editing, but it has speed up our process where it can create like LinkedIn posts, templates, and blog posts and transcripts and YouTube like description. And we take that, our content team takes that and then kind of just edits and improves it itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Summarize. Other tools, another tool that I've seen does it. It's called Cast Magic. So yeah, that's what we've been using, our AI, some of our AI stuff. I did find one recently where like, this is going to blow people's mind, but like where it can create an avatar of you And then like it actually looks like you, but it's actually an AI version of you on video, which is like, what?
Mildly terrifying.
It is so terrifying. Yeah. And
Are
so
you
when
using it?
no, we're not. But I'm like, when I saw, I'm trying to find the tool right now. But when I saw my friend mention this, yeah, I was like fully terrified of it. Yeah.
Does it replicate your voice too? Like, do you type something and then it speaks for you, or like, are you still going to have to speak the transcript and then it basically?
That's a good question. The transcriber is not perfect. I think it could, but like it's not great. So what the team at Referral Rock, I was just talking to the CEO Josh Ho. Their team would record the audio and then it would this tool. I'm trying to find what it's called right now, but it will create a avatar version of you, and its mouth is moving according to the video, the audio uploaded. It's called HeyGen. HeyGen AI, HeyGen.com. I'm not affiliated with him. We haven't tried it yet, but I was like, oh man, I'm gonna experiment with this because like it'll like scan you and it create an avatar version of you, and then you can just record it. Like you don't have to have perfect lighting or everything, which is like half of the battle with video, and then just record your voice, and then you upload it and have an avatar of you talking, and it looks scarily legit.
Like somebody's going to take that and make me say,
I know,
like,
right?
SEO is dead. Like, don't do SEO. And I'm like, hey, no.
Yeah, right.
I didn't say that.
It's like I've seen videos of ads with Mr. Beast where like they've taken his liking to sell Bitcoin or something like that.
Oh man, yeah.
And that's absolutely scary, man. I mean,
I think they had something with Joe Rogan too. I can't remember. I heard something about how they had used some ad and it was completely fabricated, which is kind of terrifying.
It is scary.
But let me get this straight in terms of like your workflow, because we're using a lot of the similar tools here. Obviously, we're recording on Riverside right now, and we use this as the basis of like transcripts, show notes, etc. I get your point on the clips too. It's been good, but not great. That's something that I want to start doing more of. So it sounds like at AppCues, like you're building out sort of a process, and you're starting with the seed of video podcast. Is that like sort of the basis of content production?
Video podcast, I think video interviews, video in general, I think is the foundation. Yeah.
And then you're using Riverside plus the Opus was the clip maker, and then the Summarizer. I can't remember the name.
Summarize, yeah.
Yeah. And then you're using those to basically, all right, the clip one is obvious. You're taking those clips and you're putting them on LinkedIn, on social, right? Like that's a social short form video distribution tactic. And then the summaries, you had mentioned maybe putting those into blog posts too. Like how are you basically like taking that seed content and filling out other channels with that?
Yeah, the summaries, we create like either a blog post, or one of the things I'm doing right now is like creating examples, like inspiring examples of onboarding. I chat with like a current customer success manager, one of their customers, and then we would chat and then turn that into like a blog post for our example section of the Product Adoption Academy. So it would like create like a blog post, but then like it needs a little bit of editing. But the cool thing about it is like you can chat with it, like ChatGPT, and be like, make it sound like you're talking to product team. And now you're like, oh, based on this interview, give me 50 different subject lines, and that feeds into our newsletter as content as well. And create me a LinkedIn post, and don't make it have too many emojis, because that's what most AI do for LinkedIn. So I think that's it feeds into kind of a seed for our LinkedIn post. Like I mentioned, it's not perfect. It does require some editing, but it does help not start from a blank page as opposed to. Yeah.
Totally. Do you ever personally use any artificial intelligence tools for research, for podcast guests, or for interviews? I'm just curious.
That is a good question. If you know something, that would be pretty awesome.
Well, I asked because like explicitly this week, I played around with Perplexity AI, and like I know you and I know your work, so I didn't necessarily need it. I was just playing around with it, and I was like, who is Ramli John and what is he known for? And it gave me this really cool summary with bullet points that was pretty accurate. I can't remember if there was anything inaccurate, but most of it I was like, oh, verified. That's the book title. That's like the college you went to. And then it gave sources and videos that I could sort of look at and like follow up on. And then very interestingly, I asked it, give me some podcast question suggestions that maybe may provoke contrarian answers, or I can't remember how I phrased it.
Yeah.
But it actually crafted a couple interesting questions. If you're curious, I haven't actually asked any of them because most of the time I end up like, I write down 5 notes and then we end up taking it in a totally different direction anyway. But I was like, okay, I can kind of see some use cases for this, right? Because then you've got like,
yeah, dude.
Like we're an organic growth agency. We work with tons of different clients in different industries. Like it's hard to learn about new industries. Could this be something that like, it doesn't supplant you, but like it basically speeds up that process where you maybe would have had to do 10 interviews and like take a full month of reading where you're like, just give me all the sources, right? Like kind of feed it to me quick. It seems like that's a very interesting use case, and I'm just sort of starting to explore it on my own.
That is interesting. That I'm gonna start using that. I have heard about this. I saw their founder get interviewed for, I think a series on Bloomsburg or something like that. So it is. I never use it for podcast prep, but like that's smart.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is like a more fun AI discussion than usual. Sometimes it's like the AI lens can go so many directions. People are like predicting things. I often go down like these existential routes where I'm like, what is the value of humanity?
I was like, what is the value of marketers?
Totally.
Taken over by AI.
It's actually, oh man, I don't want to spoiler it, but like sometimes in job interviews, I'll ask like, what's the value of content? Why do people consume content, right? Because you have to think about that. If AI can replicate like a large degree of it, then like what is the emergent value of humans creating it? And I think there's an answer. Obviously, that's why I'm still running this business.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But I can go down so many paths. Look, we're almost at time. It's a bummer. I think we should almost do like a part 2. I'll give you some time. Like you're gonna launch your new thing, which we broke the news of on here. But I just wanted to give you a chance here to, drop any links, any mentions, like where can people find you online?
Yeah, of course. I'm really been more active lately on LinkedIn. So people can find me, Ramli John. Feel free to subscribe to Marketing Power Up still. I'm going to be still talking about marketing. And then, there's a lot of user stuff that applies to marketers. So I think marketingpowerups.com is where people can check out the show and the newsletter. Amazing.
Thanks so much. It took us too long to do this, but I'm so glad we got the time to finally have a conversation here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex.